Yo, yo, what's up, good people? We're back again. It's the voice from the Phantom Geek Zone.
Hello, friends.
I'm Izzy,
I'm Riyaal.
and this time around, we're coming through with a review for good old Captain America,
The
the
First
first Avenger.
Avenger.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, as you're aware, we're basically for this specific series, we're going down
yeah,
the Marvel chronological timeline and then reviewing each movie as the events unfold
yeah.
throughout the
So
series.
this would be the first video you're seeing. Yeah,
Yes, this will be our
of
first
the
one.
series.
And then basically from here on, we're going to do, all, what is it, 32 or
I lost
however.
track. I lost track.
Yeah, so basically, this is going to be going on for quite a while. Let's
Yeah.
just put it that way. And yeah, man, I think, we just,
Hmm.
get right into it. This, I suppose, as a bit of a precursor, I must say, this was not only a heartwarming story, I'd
Yeah.
argue that it's the most heartwarming story we've ever gotten from Marvel, if you think about it.
Okay.
Like as I was watching, because I watched it, two times,
Yeah.
and every time before that, I don't even know when last I watched this. I can tell it's definitely been a couple of years, to
Same,
say the
same,
least.
same. It's been a minute.
And I was like, this is just such a beautiful story. And I mean, look, unless if you're living under a rock, we all know that Marvel is going through a bit of a tough time,
Yeah.
to say the least. But even if you think about their prime and some of the greatest movies and so on, it hasn't really necessarily been because it was a heartwarming story.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And I think
Okay.
this just really, really helped to just set it apart. On top of that, the other factor was most probably, in as much as Marvel has gained a reputation for popularizing, the B, C, and now I suppose even D list characters. There's I don't know, there's some way, even if you know of them, there's that notion that, but why are you making a movie about this character? And I think Captain America could have easily fallen into that category. Personally, I remember seeing him in cartoons. I think he featured like a Spider-Man cartoon or
Hmm.
something. And I was always like, this guy with his shield, like big whoop.
But I would even say he's not a B tier. He's an A, like a first tier character, but he's not popularized.
Is this pre-MCU though?
Pre MCU, I would say in the comics maybe. But I
Okay.
mean, I'm not a huge comic fan. I would
Yeah.
say just the standing of him and who he is, and
I think, yeah, for
he
me as a
would be
person
a
who
top
wasn't
tier.
necessarily, following the comics, my comics were essentially the cartoons.
Same, yeah.
And yeah, so that's why I was always like, Captain America, I don't understand. Again, some
The
guy with
appeal,
the
yeah.
shield, and that's that. And this movie definitely obliterated that opinion. Let me
Yeah.
just, start off by saying that. And I think then, in terms of just breaking down the story and what it's about, this takes place back in World War II
1940, yeah.
times.
World War II, 1942, I think they
Yeah,
mentioned. Yeah.
back in early 1940s. And so, as you know, World War II, that's basically, the Nazi slash Hitler era of world wars. And you have this, we'll start with the doctor.
Yeah.
You've got this doctor. He's he's a German doctor. Hitler finds out that this guy is working on a serum in order to enhance human strength and overall abilities. And he's like, oh man, this is definitely someone we
Yeah.
could use as part of our overall arsenal against all our enemies.
Mm.
And he has this lieutenant called Johann Schmidt, who's a true believer of Hitler. He makes him
Yeah.
a leader of his own platoon, and he's a big guy in
Yeah.
terms of the takeover plan.
Yes.
Now, this guy's ambition definitely is a little beyond
Yeah.
reason at times, to the point where, upon encountering the doctor, he's like, no, man, I'm going to take this serum and I'm going to inject myself. And the doctor's like, first of all, just as a human, your personality, your character, you aren't meant for this. But more
It's
importantly,
not ready.
the serum itself isn't ready. But again, the guy's ambition,
Yeah.
defies logic and reason. He injects himself. He does gain the super
Yeah, he
strength,
gets powers, but with
but
the
he also has
effects.
some side effects. He basically loses his skin. I
He
think
has
that's
no.
pretty
He's
much.
no face.
Yeah, he loses his skin and takes on this.
Red Skull. He becomes the Red Skull.
Yeah, he becomes a red skull. But I think just to try and describe what that means, essentially, he's like
It's like
a skeleton with like a very
so.
thin layer of skin that looks red.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like It's not a horror movie, but if it was a horror movie, it'd be dripping blood. But it's like
Yeah,
dried up
but
caked blood.
yeah, it's not dripping with it. That's why it's like red colored
Yeah.
skin. Let's just put it that
Yeah.
way. And then the doctor ends up, fleeing Germany. He ends up in America, and America, of course, is a part of the war. They're like, we also want to do what we can in terms of, increasing our chances of winning this war and giving our soldiers, as great chance as possible by enhancing their abilities. So this doctor joins, what is it, Strategic Scientific Research Unit?
I just know it as the
SSR.
SSR.
Yeah.
The
Strategic Scientific.
precursor to SHIELD, if you will.
Yes. And this is where now they're doing, all sorts of experiments to see what weapons they can use to enhance their soldiers' ability in the war. And he develops the serum once again. And now they're looking for worthy candidates in order to take this.
Emphasis on worthy.
Emphasis on worthy. And this is kind of sort of where Captain, or rather Steve Rogers, before he got the mantle, this is where Steve Rogers gets into the picture. We got, the great Tommy Lee Jones playing like, a sergeant of the army. And because he's an army guy, he wants your typical army brat,
big muscles, guy, no brains.
Yeah, follows orders. Exactly. That's the person he wants to give the serum to. And, the doctor just happens to walk by and overhears a conversation
between Steve and Bucky.
Steve Rogers has with his friend Bucky. Now, just to break down Steve Rogers' history a little bit, he couldn't be more tiny.
So like,
if he was like a 1 year old, he's like a scrawny little kid, barely got any meat on his bones.
Got all the ailments in the world.
Yeah, this guy's got like 6 or 7 different ailments, and because the army wants the best of the best, I remember with the one rejection, they told him that on asthma alone
you would have
been disqualified, but you got like 5 or 6 others on top of that. And what he does is that he'll be going around the country, trying to apply to join the force about 5 different times.
5 times,
He keeps getting rejected, but he would never give up. So the conversation that the doctor overhears basically is about Steve saying that, look, man, I have no right to be here. I want to be in the war fighting alongside my people. And the doctor then realized that, man, this guy, as scrawny as he is, his heart,
his character
is exactly the sort of person that we need for the serum, because a major effect of the serum is that it enhances who the person is. He said,
not just physically.
If you're bad, you become worse. If you're good, you become great. Then, Steve joins the group of trainees there, and of course, everyone is like, man, what in the world is going on? But one of my favorite lines, to jump ahead a bit, is when he's about to then get the serum, and the one guy's like, man, somebody give that kid a sandwich. No matter how many times I watch this movie, that line always just stands out for me, So then Steve is chosen as the worthy candidate. He gets the serum. Unfortunately for him, instead of actually joining the war, because there was a Nazi/Hydra agent who was there to spy on the process.
And
because,
sabotage it.
Johann Schmidt, aka Red Skull, made sure that this doctor, I don't trust that he's not going to be able to succeed with this formula, so I'm going to have to stop him by all means. So he has someone spying in on the process of, them trying to inject their next super soldier, and the guy ends up destroying the facilities.
Kills the doctor.
He kills the doctor, so the serum cannot be recreated. And the second serum, which was meant for someone else,
he destroyed the last vial.
Destroyed. So that's pretty much it as far as the doctor's plans and America as a whole in terms of building an army of super soldiers. So because of this, they end up turning Steve Rogers, to quote Tommy Lee Jones' character, into a chorus girl. So they make him a propaganda machine.
What's her name? Agent Carter says a dancing monkey.
Yeah. So they turn him into a propaganda machine. Goes around the country to encourage people to buy government bonds
to fund the war.
Because through the sale of government bonds, and the government can fund the war essentially. But Steve, because of his big heart, turns out to be so much more than what they had intended. He starts off by fleeing a troop of, what was it? Is it over 100, if not way more, of captured,
they said close to 400.
Close to 400 army guys.
Prisoners of war,
These are American soldiers that he freed. And then they go on a whole mission to basically tear down the entire fleet
of Hydra.
The Hydra. Hydra is Because remember,
The
there's a
sign
scientific
SSR, yeah,
strategic
SSR,
research
yeah,
initiative. That's the American side, and then
and
Hydra has
Hydras.
their own research people that
Yeah,
they call Hydra.
The Nazis are scientific as Hydra.
Yeah. So then, Captain America, as Steve Rogers is now known, goes on with this, merry band of, army
Yeah,
brats, and they go destroy Hydra down, to destroying Johann Schmidt himself. And that's pretty much, the overarching story.
yeah, and
And
then
the first thing that I want to break down
wait,
is
just to add on, and concurrently while this is happening, Red Skull is finding the Tesseract, first Infinity Stone,
yes, 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 yes,
and
yes.
pushing his own agenda to world domination.
Yes, and yeah, the Tesseract for him became
Yeah,
an unlimited power
so
source,
yep.
which whoever wins the war is the guy with the bigger gun. So then that's the power source that
Iron
he
Man
was
1.
using in order to achieve that. So yeah, that then covers
Yeah,
the overall story.
yeah,
Now the first thing that I want to get into, because again, upon rewatching this, it was the thing that stood out for me. Not only given how well it was executed here, but how much better it was done in so many other Marvel movies
yeah,
down the line. The casting,
yeah.
the the,
I
the,
enjoy
the
the
casting
casting.
was insane because of two particular levels that I want us to get
Okay.
into. One is just a matter of who's playing the role, but secondly, the chemistry among the
Yes,
characters.
that is standout for me.
So yeah, give us your take on
So
that.
casting Hugo Weaving as Red Skull,
Yeah,
brilliant. I
yeah,
thought he stole all the scenes he was in whenever he was shown.
yeah,
Whether him being psychotically manic,
yeah.
or which is all the scenes basically, or his tone and his cadence when he's talking in a menacing
Yeah,
way,
yeah, yeah. Just
like
how commanding
yeah,
he
it's like
is.
he's owns the presence, but you can
Yeah,
also see there's something unhinged there as
yes.
well.
And without needing to be the typical villain who's like
Yeah.
shouting over the top or
Yes.
anything. Yeah, he incited fear without doing
Yeah.
any of those, I suppose, cliched
Yeah.
mannerisms. Yeah.
And like for me also, he's just so nonchalant when he just killed Nazi officers. He's just like,
Yes, yes. People on his
oh,
own
I
team,
was
eh?
like, I'll show you how this thing works.
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah,
Like yeah,
because I suppose while we're there, right, that's another thing to note about the Red Skull is that, again, going back to his ambition, it was so insane and intense that back when he first took the serum, because of his physical deformity, Hitler did a soft demotion.
yeah,
He gave him his own fleet, yes, but he shipped him off to America because, in his own words, he no longer fits that Aryan,
yeah,
that Aryan look and the ideologies that go with it. So he was like, no, 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 you go over there. I'm gonna just stay here with my
yeah,
people. This added to Red Skull's ambition to the point where he even wanted to overthrow Hitler
yeah,
because he had his map of the
yeah.
places he
And
wants to take over.
Berlin was
Berlin was among them
on.
as well,
Yep,
which is why he ended up turning against the
the
people on his
Nazis.
team.
Yeah,
Because the other thing is that all of them viewed him as crazy and believing in magic as the solution to win the war. Because again, remember the Tesseract is something that's godly because this is
it's an
it's
Infinity
like
Stone.
yeah, it's an infinity stone, a universal, unlimited source of energy
Wow,
and
and
power.
power.
But
Yep.
everyone else wanted to do, classic guns, bombs, that sort of thing. But he was thinking a little bigger than that.
Yeah. Other castings, I would say, obviously, Chris Evans is Captain
Yeah,
America.
Chris Evans is Captain
It's an
America,
obvious
a
one.
role that he turned down 3 times, hey?
Serious.
3 times because
Wow.
he had hesitations as far as taking on a big comic book character role.
Ah.
Because look, yes,
Yeah.
he's played the Human Torch before, but comic book movies at the time were still sort of in their infancy compared
Yeah.
to where they are now. And I mean, as people like Tarantino will be so quick to point out, in that space of comic book
It's the
characters,
comic
there
book
aren't
character
really movie stars anymore.
Yeah.
It's the characters that are the stars. So he was scared of having a character that will overshadow his acting career.
Which I tend to
Essentially,
disagree with some roles.
it's it's a give
It's a
and take.
case
There
by
is
case.
something to be said
Yeah.
for that, but I think people tend to generalize a
Yeah.
bit too much where it's concerned. So he felt like, no man, it's a bit too much for me. I'd rather just continue with my career as
Okay.
is. And it's unfortunate because every story that comes out about this, as far as who changed his mind, is different. I saw one version that said his mom convinced him otherwise. I saw one which is a bit more prevalent that says Robert Downey Jr., aka Iron Man, is the guy who convinced him to take on the role. And at least this one has a bit more credence to it because Robert Downey himself was
Yeah,
asked
yeah,
about it, and he said, "Look, I'm not gonna say he has the role because of me, but I called him and I had a competition with
yeah.
him when he was, still
That's
doubtful."
interesting.
And there are many times where people always talk about, I can't imagine anyone else in the role. And I'm like, stop it, stop it. Like,
Yeah,
that's what the acting world is. If someone doesn't take the role, you move it to the next person. But I will say, the way he embodied this character was insane. But I think we'll do a further breakdown into that
yeah.
a little later on.
And then, so those are two, obviously the villain and the hero, and then
Mm-hmm.
the side characters. I think they all play their role really well,
Yeah, yeah,
from the
yeah.
Doc to Tommy Lee Jones
Yeah, Stanley
to
Tucci as the
yeah,
German doctor
yeah.
was.
You have to kind of do a double take. He's like, this face
He
looks
was
familiar, looks very
phenomenal. He
familiar,
was
and it's like,
phenomenal. And I mean, again,
yeah,
one of those inevitable things, and bear with us, I'm going to say it now with the first movie already because it's likely to come up quite a lot. Because we're caught up to Marvel, up to the very,
yeah,
recent movie, there's going to be those moments that make us miss the old Marvel, so to
yeah,
speak. And this is also an era where they treated the movies as movies,
yeah.
not just a comic book
The
spectacle. And
and
the
there's not
grounding
trying
that
to
comes through.
find comedy everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. It was just, tell a great
The
story
the grounded moments stay
and leave it
grounded.
at that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then
So
you don't
they
need
came a lot, even through the portrayal of the characters. And yeah, Stanley Tucci,
yeah.
especially if you think about how he was in the movie for like, I don't know if it's 30, 40 minutes, maybe,
I think the first 30 minutes.
Yeah, he wasn't in there
Yeah,
for that long because even if you think about how, let's say he died at the 1 hour
yeah,
mark, it's not like he was there for the entire hour. He would just pop up here and there,
yeah.
but every time he was there,
He always
he
had
made an impact.
he made an impact, and what I noted down was he always had nuggets of advice for Steve.
Yes,
He was
yeah.
like the father figure for Steve.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. His dialogue in the movie is arguably the greatest of
Yeah.
anyone else.
Like when he's talking to Steve just before the process, like pour your drink, pour your drink. Oh, you can't have a drink, but then after that, he's like, obviously he says, "Great man, great, good man, better."
Yes, yes. In terms
That
of the
line, but
effect on the
there were
serial.
other lines there as well. It was just like, yo, it hits
Yeah,
home, yeah.
and when he tells him about how people who have power, who've always had
Yes,
power, always
that's what
end
he
up
was saying. Yeah,
underestimating it. But for those who didn't, you
Don't-
always understand the power of
oh,
strength. And I was like, man. And I think part of what makes his character so profound, specifically his interactions with Steve Rogers, is that when you look at who Steve grew to become over the iterations of the movies and so on, you realize that as
yeah,
great and noble as Steve always was, a lot of it also comes from what
yeah.
the doctor said,
He stayed the
because
same.
he definitely took those words to heart. Speaking about how, look, no matter what happens, just always remain a good person. That's pretty much the one thing I ask of you. And we, of course, know that's definitely what Steve carried on doing throughout his entire run.
Yeah.
And so yeah, Stanley
Obviously,
Tucci
yeah.
definitely stand out.
Agent Carter as well.
Agent Carter
Haley
was
Atwell,
was
yeah.
amazing. I forgot the first name,
Haley
but
Atwell.
Haley Atwell. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Haley Atwell was just insane
Yeah.
to the
Like
point where there's a bit of frustration on my end in terms of her being underutilized. Look, on the one end,
they
this took
did give her a
place.
spin-off.
No, no, I know, which I would get to. And on the one end, you have to understand that this took place in the 40s, whereas a lot of Marvel stories take place in
Now.
modern era. So there's only so much you can do as far as keeping her on. And as you say, she did get a series. Unfortunately, it ended up getting cancelled, but she was just so great. And I suppose
Yeah.
maybe at the end of the day, it's one of those like rather leave them wanting more, especially when we see how many people overstayed their welcome, as far as the characters down the line. But we'll speak more on that as and when the time comes. So again, her casting was
Yeah.
insane,
And
but
like
her chemistry
with Steve was the thing
her
that stood
chemistry
out.
with Steve was
Just
was amazing, man.
The bands,
Yeah,
There's
man.
obviously that's given to the script writing as well, but
Yeah, yeah.
the portrayal of that.
The portrayal
Yeah.
definitely came through, and it was great also that her character wasn't just one of those. We're just here as there's a thing where, especially where female characters are concerned, it's
a
like you make
damsel
them
in distress.
a side character, damsel in distress.
You could say like in Thor, like Jane Foster wasn't in the first one. She wasn't as powerful as she was, obviously in the subsequent.
Yeah, and
Love
not
and
even
Thunder
about
movie,
physical strength, just
just the powerful
your
character,
presence and the relevance that you have to the story. So she had great relevance, she had great presence in the story.
Yeah, and she was the catalyst for him to become, or for him to go save Bucky and the rest of
Yeah,
the people.
she added a lot to his greatness.
She got him out of that rut.
And that's one of the bigger things as well. She influenced the story.
Yeah.
Again, she wasn't just there for the sake of being there, just so, oh, our hero can have a love interest and that sort of thing. And it was also great that, of course, the relationship had that, will they, won't they sort of feel, but it never became like the focal point of, of course, typical, now they have to fall in love, that sort of thing. But it always being up in the air.
Yeah.
Make sure that it was never the central focus of whatever is going on. Because again, at the end of the day, you are in the middle of a war. You were brought here in order to, help win the war, number one. Number two, you always said, as Steve Rogers, that you would like to help to win the war. Yeah, so they never really diverted away from that. So I think, that is something to be commended.
Big casting was
Bucky,
Bucky. But Bucky didn't he gets his time to shine later.
It does come later, but I think even here, and that's the thing about, not only the older Marvel movies, but just a great movie in general. It's that you don't need to have someone be over the top, number one, and you don't need to have them be in every single frame in order to have great presence and impact. So with Bucky, the whole thing of establishing how they were best friends, it came through in as much as he was in relatively few scenes.
It was like a few scenes in the beginning.
But it carried very well, So I think, but again, his casting and the portrayal, Sebastian Stan did a phenomenal job.
He always knocks it out of the park. And then Howard Stark as well, his casting.
Yeah, Howard Stark as, Dominic Cooper as Howard Stark, aka, Tony Stark's dad. Was amazing, particularly because remember there's two versions.
He's like a mad scientist. Yeah, he gives you mad scientist vibes.
There's two versions of Howard Stark that we see throughout the MCU. There's this younger one, and then there's an older one that comes through later. The older one, you can tell that he's a bit jaded, but again, given his role, which is a shield agent essentially, kind of does explain why he felt that way. But seeing him in his young and more charismatic element was just great. And you also, of course, see, the elements of that little arrogance coming through, and you're like, that's 100%, Tony's father. So he did an amazing job. And he gelled very well with everyone else.
They all gelled really well.
Yeah, the ensemble was crazy. And again, Tommy Lee Jones, man, I mean,
he just had moments, but he just
yeah, he carried whatever scene he was in, or at least added a lot to it.
If you don't know who Tommy Lee Jones is, Agent K, Men in Black.
Yes. He played Agent K, Men in Black. I'm trying to think.
No Country for Old Men.
Any other like major, especially ones that will make people go like, oh yeah, him. He played Two-Face in the old Batman movies, for. But yeah, Tommy Lee Jones was amazing, and for me, he's one of the top two. And as much as they tend to be cast a lot as those army general type characters, but they kill it each time because inherently they carry that spirit. And I never mind seeing them in those roles. It's Tommy Lee Jones and the other guy, Clancy Brown.
Oh yes,
Clancy Brown is incredibly amazing. I've been trying to think, what popular character does he have that we can use to try and explain?
He's in John Wick, the most recent one.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
He's one like part of the Under the Table with people.
Yeah.
Or he was in the Dexter reboot.
Okay.
New Blood.
I think for me, one of the more recent works I know him for, he was the general in the Punisher / Daredevil, before they became like, MCU properties. But he's one of those guys, if you see his face, you're like, oh this guy. In the Flash, the series, he was a general in there as well. And he's got that physical presence, and above all, he's got the great voice as well.
But like conversely, Tommy Lee Jones doesn't have the physical presence, but he has the facial expression of a
He's got
general, He just looks like someone who's never happy. Yeah, he's never happy.
Yes,
but he was like,
whenever he's like disciplining people and all, like the one time where he's talking to Agent Carter, he's like, we're gonna have a conversation, you and I, that you are not gonna like, and you're like, I don't wanna. I'm glad I'm on the other side of that. There's the interrogation scene where when they've captured, Red Skull's right-hand man, and even the way he was like, I'm not gonna come in here and intimidate you. I'm just gonna tell you what our plan is and leave it at that. But even then, man, it was a bit scary, so to speak. So yeah, Tommy Lee Jones.
Or even when Cap came back from saving everyone, Cap's like, I'm here to take my punishment.
He's like,
don't worry about it.
That will be necessary, soldier. And yeah, so I think that pretty much rounds up at
Yeah,
least
the
the
characters.
principal
Yeah,
cast
yeah,
of this. And I think everyone just did an amazing
yeah.
job. They
It
gelled very
was,
well with one another.
yeah, what it was a war story with love story elements, which was
Yeah,
nice.
yeah,
It
yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
like the main focus.
So overall, yeah,
Yeah.
it did have some heart to it, which again
Hmm.
speaks to what I was saying initially about this just being such a heartwarming story at the center of it all. And I guess we can then get into some of the things that we enjoyed the
Yeah.
most, the
So
standout moments, whether it's a line, a scene.
so let's see. There's obviously a lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, so when they're training, obviously a scene that always stands out to me is like get the flag.
yeah, yeah,
So in the
yeah.
scene, they're running and then they say, or they're drilling or whatever, and
Hmm.
then the army sergeant,
Hmm.
drill sergeant, there we go, that's the word I'm looking for. He's like, whoever can get that flag will get a ride home.
Yeah.
Cool. Everybody tries climbing up the flagpole. Captain or Steve Rogers at the time was like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm still scrawny. I can't climb up that. He uses his brain. He's like, he undoes the bolts at the bottom of the pole, and then obviously it falls down. He picks a flag and goes.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that was a cool thing. It was
yeah.
like, okay, Doc, we see what you see. Like,
Exactly.
it's like
Yeah.
it's not just a meathead. He's got some
And I
brains.
like that those sort of scenes because I think for us as an audience,
Yeah,
from him taking every ass kicking in the
yeah,
world and talking about how, oh, I got beat up in that alley and behind that shop
yeah,
and over there on that corner, and we actually see him take some
yeah,
of these beatings. We knew that he had such a big heart,
yeah.
but the other characters, because again, when Tommy Lee Jones, saw him, he's like, I asked you to get me an army of guys, and aren't you getting me this asthmatic kid? Like, what's going on?
And then his whole Tommy Lee Jones character changed when he's like grenade. That
Yeah,
which is what I
that's
wanted to
another
get
scene
to.
I was going
Yeah,
to get into now. But my point is, those sort of scenes that they were great because they showed everyone else. Because as much as Agent Carter was a nice person in this movie, I'm sure there was also moments of that, like, what is this kid doing
yeah,
here? But with Steve showing that, no, man, I've got the heart and courage of the best when it comes to people that you want to have on your side.
yeah,
That scene with the flag was one that shows, oh, okay, there's actually some intelligence that's good.
yeah.
Because everyone's trying to climb up the flag, but the pole is slippery, so no one can get anywhere. And they said no one has brought it down
It's
in
17 years.
17 years.
17 years, yeah. It was
He
some
just
crazy long time. Yeah,
quick got it down by being smart. And as they
yeah.
say, think smart, not
Not
hard.
hard.
And then there's that scene with the grenade, right?
Yeah.
Tommy Lee Jones trying to,
Oh, yeah, him and the doc were arguing. It's like, why did you give me this kid?
yeah,
And why are you choosing him?
Tommy Lee Jones trying to say that, look at this guy. This guy is a proper soldier. He's fit, he's strong, he's fast, he can take orders. And he's like, no, man, we're not here to promote bullies. We're looking for people with good hearts. And he's like, you don't win soldiers, you don't win
With
war
wars,
with
with a
nice
good, yeah.
guys. And he takes a grenade. He's like, you win wars with courage. He takes a dummy grenade. He throws it, in the middle of all the trainees. Everyone runs.
Disperses. Yep.
Steve, who was at the back, mind you, he runs towards the grenade, jumps on it, and he tells everyone, get out, run, run, run.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, it was a dummy grenade, so they find out that nothing is going to happen. But just that display of courage said a lot to Steve's character.
Courage
And
and selfless.
that's also where we got one of my favorite lines, where Steve is like, is this a test? Because the thing is with Steve, as much as he wants nothing more than to be part of the army platoon,
Yeah. He knows
once
he has
he gets chosen, there's that disbelief that remains in the back of his mind. The first time was when he initially met the doctor who chose him to be part of the program, and he says to him, he was asking him, "Why do you wanna kill Nazis?" Is what he asked him, and he's like, "Is this a test?" And I love how the doctor was up front. He's like,
Yes.
"Yes." And then the second time you ask the question is after he jumped on the grenade, only to find that it's not gonna go off, and he's like, "This is a test." So there's that part of him that's like,
He's always doubting himself.
have I really made it?
Yeah.
Because I think as much as he was always pushing,
He's always getting
he
rejected.
always believed that
Yeah.
he would never really make it. So that was like a nice little heartwarming scene. And everyone again, Agent Carter, even Tommy Lee Jones is looking at him like,
Yeah.
okay, there's a little something to this kid. We're not 100% convinced just yet, but yeah, I think there's a little something. Any other standouts for you?
Well, I did mention Red Skull. I mean, stealing every scene.
Okay.
Your side, is there anything that comes to mind?
With Red Skull, I'm gonna put a pin in that. I want to have a bit of a discussion
Okay.
about it, but yeah, we'll get to that in a bit. And again, for me, granted, I've already mentioned, but the chemistry was just insane, man, and the simplicity and the basic nature of the story. Because as they say, and as Marvel has shown to be true over time, it's it's a lot better to tell a simple story in a great way
Yeah.
than to try and tell an over convoluted and complicated story and try to make it great. Like it's a little hard because at the end of the day, remember we are mere mortals as the audience.
We
We
need to
need to
associate.
relate to the
Yeah.
characters. So if you're gonna make it about it being super or super characters more than anything else, you're gonna start to lose us a bit. But this was such a nice,
Yeah.
down to earth, grounded story, and I think that as an overarching thing was amazing. Again, I can't emphasize the chemistry among the characters enough because it's one of the greater displays of
Yes.
that, across the entire MCU. And man, yeah, Steve Rogers, the effects actually, I must say, the effects were incredible
Yeah, like
because what they did was,
CGIing his face
CGIing
on
his face
somebody
on
else's
top of a
body.
body. They basically had like, imagine like a little 14-year-old kid,
Michael Cera in Arrested
Michael
Development.
Cera, you imagine someone like him, and then they had Steve Rogers or Chris
Chris
Evans'
Evans' face,
face
yeah.
on top of it. It didn't
It's
look out of
ballsy.
place.
It's
It
very
looked very
ballsy.
real. This is like back in 2011.
Yeah.
Marvel was still kind of sort of finding its feet, so it's not even like they were the conglomerate they are now. It's like, oh, of course you got billions in the accounts or whatever. And so for the time, it was amazing, and even how well it stood the test of time. I think that adds to the greatness of that particular
Nobody's
effect
throwing a meme about it, like, and
with the mustache. And
yeah.
yeah, no, this was very well done. Justice League could have learned a thing or two, but yeah, that's a different story. And I think one of there's a couple of standout scenes that came through for me. For instance, after Steve gets his powers, I mean, first of all, the transformation was just insane.
Yes,
Like that,
yeah.
every time I watch
Well,
this
I mean,
thing,
fun fact for you peeps, Agent Carter's hand thing
it wasn't
actually wasn't
scripted.
scripted. She
She couldn't help
genuinely,
because again, right, this guy went in there like a scrawny little kid. He comes out buff as hell, and so when she saw him up close, like she couldn't help but just touch his chest a bit. So yeah, that also I suppose speaks to the amazing physique that Chris Evans and even Steve Rogers has in the movie. And again, just seeing the transformation was incredibly insane. And because one of the big things, right, when a character turns super, is the display of power and how you choose to introduce that. And I think they did it in such a great way here because, as mentioned before in the story breakdown, as he was then getting his serum and see that the transformation is actually perfection. There's this
the Hydra assassin, yeah.
The Hydra assassin. That's when then he kills the Doctor, escapes with the second vial of the serum,
and Cap
now
chases
Steve
him.
Rogers is chasing him down the street, and just watching him run down the like.
But what I thought was really cool was it showed he wasn't used to his body because the one
he crashed into
he
that
overran
shop.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a point where as he's running, he ends up slipping and crashing into an entire shop. But just the scene where he's running, and I don't know, man. There's something about because when you think about super speed, right? There's always that thing. Like if you think about movies like The Flash or even with Superman, it's just that blur that goes by. But the way they did it in like a more practical manner, you get a greater sense of just how fast this guy is. And so just seeing that in action, this guy's like leaping over cars, like yeah, that for me was hella insane. And even when he first gets his shield, when he officially then becomes, Captain America, the hero, there was that scene where they're breaking into the infirmary of the Hydra guys. They open the doors, they show the shield, and then he's then coming through. They start shooting the people, beating them down. Like that display was pretty insane. As great as the effects were, there were a couple moments of like overall, I didn't like how there's this odd gray tint, so to speak, over the scenes. And yeah, for me, I understand, it's a period piece.
Yeah,
When I show that this is back in the days, but especially as a person who's seen a good number of period movies and series that didn't rely on that gray tint, it felt like it's taking away from the experience a little bit. Even though that's speaking more to what I maybe didn't enjoy so much, but I think yeah, man, the dialogue as well. across the board was for me
Good, yeah.
something that was just incredibly great and amazing. And I appreciated how even though Captain America is like a super soldier, you still feel how he's a human being,
Yeah.
and not necessarily as far as his heart, but just the abilities that he was displayed. Like, yeah, he jumps a little higher. When he punches someone, they land a little further. But it wasn't like this guy has godly
Yeah.
powers out of the
Because I mean,
blue.
even that first chasing, he got shot and he could see him bleeding.
Yeah,
You know, it's still
you
a
know,
person.
when he's going and fighting against the Hydra agents, he's still proc with the shield and that sort of thing. It's not like, oh, shoot me, I can
Yeah.
deflect bullets or anything like that. So it helped to just keep the reality and
Grounded,
just
yeah.
to keep it grounded. And I think before we go further, right? So with the Red Skull, I want to break down. I mean, I say this all the time, right? Any superhero movie or any movie with a
Yeah, it's
villain
only as
is
good
only
as
as
what
great
he.
as the villain, and the villain is only as great as his motivation. Granted, he had great motivation because I mean, he
In
wants to take
his
over the
in his
world. This is
eyes,
a
yeah.
war, and the portrayal by Hugo Weaving is great. But
Yeah.
I think the praise is probably better placed with Hugo Weaving and
Yeah.
his portrayal
Yeah.
than
That
Red
I can
Skull as a character.
that I can agree with. I felt the portrayal was done really well.
Yeah, because if you think about the presence of the character in the movie,
Yeah.
look, every just about every movie, the hero is always gonna win, the
Win,
villain is
yeah.
gonna lose. But you also need to think about the actual stakes. Like, is there ever a moment where you're like, oh, we are actively in danger? Because I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes when you're watching these, you kind of sort of imagine yourself as like a civilian, in the midst of that time period, whatever's going on. So like with this one, it's like, oh, this is the middle of the war. These are the people that are going to save us. This is the guy that wants to take over us. What's going to happen? I don't know if there was ever a moment where it felt like I would have been, or the people would have been in imminent danger. It was more a matter of preventing the danger from
Yeah,
coming
okay.
through. Because if you think about
Yeah.
it, what did Red Skull do in this movie?
Yeah. Okay.
All he did
Yeah.
was he found a great power source. He charged up his weapons. He was gearing up to
And
take over. And remember,
yeah,
his thing
okay.
wasn't even a matter of
Okay.
because with the Nazis, there were certain territories that they were prioritizing in terms of taking over. But with him, I mean, they even asked, his henchmen when they captured him, like, we want to know, why does he want to take over? Where is he headed? And he's like, he wants to take
Everywhere.
over everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
He wanted world domination. They didn't even give him like a young city or something to take over, just to really
Emphasize,
show that, oh man, this
his
is the
power.
level of threat that he's displaying.
Okay.
The closest we
I see.
got to that was when he vaporized his guys, and there was like maybe three or so. It showed that okay, the weapons are powerful, but I don't know if I can say we got to the point of actually fearing him and his display of force and power. So that's the takeaway.
Okay.
And
Okay.
what I use kind of sort of knock off a couple
So,
of points.
so you're happy with the portrayal, but you're not happy with the
The
motivation.
portrayal, but the character as a villain, I don't know if he was up
Okay.
there. The only way, because that's the other thing about great villains, you need to be a contemporary, i.e., someone who's like, neck for neck in terms of the match up with the hero.
Okay.
Besides the
I see
fact
you, I
that
see
the
what
two
you're
of
saying.
them got, the serum, one got
Yeah.
the beta version, one got the proper one. I don't know that.
Because even when we were supposed to have that fight, the bridge,
Exactly.
yeah, they just like, nope, we're not doing this fight now.
Exactly. There were a couple of moments where they met up with one another, but there were hardly any punches thrown. Yes, they had actual fights, but even the choreography of the fight was a bit more generic than anything. And I mean,
Yeah.
at the risk of contradicting my earlier point, I know that Steve Rogers is still not only a normal human being, he was never a fighter or anything, but the fight needs to at least make us feel like, oh, could
He's
this
in
guy
danger,
actually
yeah.
kill?
Yeah.
Like could he kill Steve Rogers? I never felt any of that. So I think he was more of a behind the shadows, so to speak, sort of boss. But there wasn't really any moment that made me
Okay.
feel like, oh man, this guy,
Yeah, okay.
he's a villain that has everyone at risk. It was more a matter of preventing him from getting to that point. So yeah, I can't help but take away a couple of points from him, based off of that.
Any other moments that didn't sit too well or didn't like or just indifferent about?
Like I said, that little gray sort of tint
Yep.
thing for me was a bit weird. But other than that, I'm trying to think. Not to say that they weren't there, because again, right, when you judge a movie, it's about the strength or to what extent certain things stood out. Whether it's the great things and how they stood out, or the bad things and how they stood out. So then maybe a couple of other bad elements, but I wouldn't say they necessarily stood out to the point where I'm
Okay.
like, this took
Yeah.
away from the viewing experience. Interestingly enough, for me, every time I think of, because in general, I don't know if it's the same for you, I feel like movie studios, this is now across the board, never mind MCU or whatever, it's like they tend to have a hard time making origin stories. I don't know if you have
Yeah.
that many great origin stories.
Um,
It's
yeah,
not a
because
thing.
in essence, this is an origin story because it
Yeah.
starts in present day, the movie, where they find the ship,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then obviously it's flashbacks.
yeah. But yeah, overall,
Yeah,
I'd say, which is why we always get so
yeah,
happy and, over the moon whenever you do get an amazing
origin.
origin story. It's because it's not necessarily a given. That being said,
But I mean,
anytime,
people are subverting that trope now, or studios where they just we know the character, we'll just start from
yeah, yeah, fair enough. But even with those movies aside, there's so many origin
origins.
stories that
Yeah,
we have, but very few great ones. So with that said, for me, every time I would think of Captain America, I'd be like, it was an okay movie. It was. But upon watching it, and I remember even having this feeling the last time I watched it, however many years ago, was that when you actually watch the movie, you realize that, oh man, it's actually greater than what you thought it was.
yes, I've done that.
Yeah,
Now as we're going through the
when you
series.
have your conversations, when you
Yeah,
think about, whether you want to say top five or just in general great origin, you wouldn't necessarily put character and you're like, it was okay.
yeah,
But when you watch it, it's like, oh
no,
man,
yeah.
this is actually, a great and impactful movie. So I think we definitely need to give it its props as far as origin stories are concerned. And again, with us watching it with the purposes of reviewing it and doing a whole breakdown, the fact that there weren't too many things that popped out as far as but this
Yeah,
didn't happen or we didn't like this and that speaks to overall just how great it is. Granted, it's not necessarily amazing,
amazing. But
and
you can't fault it for
you can't
much.
really fault it for much. I think one of the things that makes it get a bit lost is when you think about it in terms of other movies in comic movies in general, origin or not. They tend to be more powerful characters or maybe
Yeah,
better villains and that sort of thing, and it gets a bit lost in that conversation. But I think yeah, we need to definitely start giving it its flowers where that conversation is concerned. And I suppose an element we left out of the main story. So at the end of the movie, right? He goes, has his fight with Red Skull, he defeats him. Before I finish that, I'd say one of the great elements, which again sort of highlights just how, I suppose, ballsy, for lack of a better word, Marvel was back in its earlier days. I love there was a scene where, remember, there was that big ship, because now this is like the penultimate moment in the movie.
yeah.
There's that big ship, and it's got all the missile planes in there, and they're starting their voyage and dropping off, they're intending on dropping off bombs in all these different places, because that's the beginning of him actually taking over the world, and New York being among them. There was a plane that was veering off to head to its strike point, and Steve Rogers was
Oh
on that
yeah, you
plane.
just jumped on.
Then there was a part where, because there were two Hydra agents on that plane, when one of the guys got knocked off, he fell into the propeller, and you saw his
Oh,
blood splatter, and I was like, yeah,
there was also a scene at the beginning when he first changed. There was, I think, Agent Carter did a headshot to one of the, and
Yeah,
there was blood spatter.
she hit a
There was proper
headshot. Yeah,
blood
yeah.
spatter.
The driver of the getaway
Yeah,
car got him with a headshot, and you saw the blood there. And
yeah,
it's just that the second one started for me more because I mean, obviously, it was a bit
yeah.
more out there and in your face. But I'm like, yeah, you see, Marvel, like
You can tone it down, but you don't have
it's
to like
yeah,
yeah.
man. Because yeah, in case you don't know, Marvel has a thing of avoiding, showing any sort of
Well,
blood.
do you say Marvel or do you say Disney? You know?
Disney's Marvel,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
again, this is I think the second, well,
yeah,
second released. I don't know in terms of order of creation, but it's definitely one of the first movies that were made under the Disney umbrella, because it's only Iron Man and the Hulk that were made by Marvel on their own. So Disney then came through and of course did their thing as far as watering down certain elements, but it was great to see those sort of seeds in there because it also makes it believable, right? Because a lot of movies that followed after here, when there's a gruesome moment or
yeah,
a moment of great injury, you're lucky if you see a single drop of blood. What they
yeah.
normally tend to do is either be off
Bruises.
screen, they'll
Yeah,
vaporize, or as with Thor: Love and Thunder,
they'll change
which
the
we'll
color.
get
Yeah,
to down the line, they actually change the color of the blood. So things like that just make it more of a kids movie as opposed
Yeah.
to a real movie. And something like this that's so grounded, it sort
Yeah.
of needs
You
those
kind of need
elements.
it.
So
Yeah.
for me, as dark and sinister that may sound, I love the realism of it, And yeah, I think that then, at least
Yeah.
from my side,
Yeah. So
as far
I
as
mean,
the highlight points, and
highlights. So I had like one more
yeah,
when he was saving Bucky. Bucky was talking in numbers, and I thought that was him getting programmed.
yes, which is what,
And obviously, if you don't know, Bucky does become the Winter Soldier.
yeah,
So they had already started before.
that's where the whole thing actually
Yeah.
happened. Yeah, the experimentation on him and brainwashing and all of that,
So
which
I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, I see you.
I actually I don't know if maybe it is explicitly mentioned as far as when it happened. Is it a matter of after they got him out the ice that's when they started to do those experiments on him or what? But
I
I
think
didn't realize it
so. Yeah.
necessarily
So
went that
yeah.
far back
So
until I saw that
that's what
scene.
I thought because
Yeah,
like maybe it's just foreshadowing or maybe it's just random, but it kind of makes sense. They've already started programming. Then
especially
they
with
found him
how they had him
again.
isolated
Yeah.
and he was on the table clearly
Yeah.
for
Where
experimentation.
everyone else
So
was in the cells and
yeah,
whatever.
because again, remember the leader of this whole army is a super soldier. So
Yeah.
I think it'll also make sense for them to be like, because again, they captured their soldiers, they didn't kill their
Yeah.
soldiers.
They
So I
needed
think
test dummies.
they were rolling out that plan because some of them were workers.
Yeah.
Remember that henchman as they were talking about improving the output by like 30% or whatever, there were prisoners around him because he was like, I don't know if you have the capacity. It was like, then get more prisoners. So they were already figuring out different
Yeah.
points that they can utilize the prisoners as opposed to just killing them right there and
Yeah. So
there.
that was a small nugget that I picked up on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that stood out for me as well.
Yeah.
I actually forgot to bring it up. The one other thing I suppose, which is I don't know, something that took away a bit from the experience for me was speaking of Bucky, that rescue that he had with Steve Rogers, dude. I mean, you have a good sense of like my height, my weight, my
Yeah.
whatever. If I come through tomorrow and I'm just 10 centimeters taller, you're gonna be like, wait,
What
what the hell
happened?
is, like, you're gonna really want to dig into it. So, in as much as we can chalk it up to no, man, he was a bit hazy because of his state at the time. But when Bucky first sees Steve Rogers, who's now towering over him and is this muscular dude versus the scrawny kid he was, a couple of weeks back or something, I don't feel I got that impact of what in the world is going on. Like, even when he's like, Steve, is that you? It seems so simple. Like, I feel like I would argue with the guy. Like, no, man, that's not you. Like,
But no, just to counter your point there, Bucky was in the war and Steve was doing his propaganda machine. So he could have seen newspapers. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
okay,
So
okay.
he knows what Steve's look like, but to actually see him in person.
Yes, yes. Okay, okay,
Different.
okay. Yeah, that I'll give to you. Yeah, and I mean the next best set of people would be the guys who were in the room when he was being transformed, but they had
Yeah.
a good idea of what this was meant
Yeah.
to do. So okay, that I'll give to you. It's just it stood out for me because it happens in so many movies, including some of the ones that
Yeah.
we're gonna get to later. But yeah, I suppose in this sense it does make sense because yeah, he did see him. I don't know if it would have been on TV or posters or what, but okay, I suppose that then was justified.
And
Any other final thoughts you want to
I
add
think
onto this?
I think that's it for me.
Yeah, I think even for myself, that's pretty much all the points I wanted to highlight. Then I suppose then the last thing. Oh yeah, I wanted to just give the conclusion of the story because I missed it earlier on.
Yes, you were gonna.
Is so they're in that plane and they're now gearing up to go and start destroying parts of America and of course subsequently the rest of the world. And Captain America makes it onto the ship. He starts to put a stop beating down all the villains that he comes across. And then he realizes, because I mean, with all the firing of all these super weapons, they've now destroyed parts of the plane. Excuse me. So now, the coordination is a bit messed up, the controls are a bit messed up. Steve gets into the pilot's seat and he's like, man, this thing, there's no autopilot or anything. And it's not as simple as just, veering off to some other direction. It's going down, it's going to crash into New York, and of course, end up destroying at least parts of it. The best thing for me to do is just set this thing down because I'm currently above, this water slash
no
icy
people.
plane.
Yeah.
There's no people. There'll be little to no damage. I'm just gonna crash over here, and we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah,
And
that scene at the it was heartwarming. Like yeah,
yeah, man,
it's
heartwarming and heartbreaking
breaking.
because
Yeah,
now he's on the court. Remember, we said earlier he had this will they won't they thing with Agent Carter. The idea was you do this. This was essentially supposed to be the final nail in the coffin as far as bringing down this branch of the Hydra
yeah.
army. Once that is done, the war itself isn't necessarily won, but we've hit a huge milestone. Then maybe they can get a bit more time spent together while figuring out the next move. But this then ends up being the
Yeah.
last hurrah, as it were, because Steve crashes along with this thing, and because of the conditions. I suppose perhaps if you're going to talk about some of the things they could have done a bit better, it's just emphasizing
The
that
crash.
notion. Yeah, not only the crash itself, but just Steve's inability to get out as well. Because you know what happens when you see these sort of things like, no, man, as soon as it dives down, just jump out, just do whatever. But it's just maybe showing him once he's submerged and how he should like swim out, but
or like
whether it's the pressure or
but
maybe.
he was still in the ship, so I would think the better way would to have been done is like camera panning behind him and just you seeing him just seeing the floor.
Yeah, so no, the crash I do get, right? Even from however they did it in the movie, we understand that, okay, the plane
Yeah.
crashed. My thing is just emphasizing that he actually couldn't get out.
Oh, okay.
So have the
Okay,
plane
got you,
crash,
got you, got you, got you.
show the water, coming in. And babe, man, this is not like freezing water. It's not like the earlier scene where we saw him swim, in like a little
Yeah. The river,
I don't
yeah.
know, yeah, in a river essentially. So it's like this is ice cold water, and perhaps all the mechanisms that are in there, whether it's the weapons or other parts of the plane, show those, let's say fall on top of him or something, just to show that he was proper trapped. I think yeah, that could have driven that point home just a little better. And so as this thing is crashing, he realized that I may not get a chance to ever talk to Agent Carter ever again.
Peggy.
So he radios in to her, and I mean, even
Yeah.
Tommy Lee had the sense to be like,
Yeah,
man,
let's
give
go.
them some
Let's just go.
space,
Let's just go.
So
Yeah,
as
that was
the
cool.
not even as the plane is crashing, just before then, from that moment up until the actual crash, Steve is just having this conversation with her, and they're not even directly acknowledging that they may not see each other once again. It's just a matter of, I think I'm going to be, I'm going to miss out on that dance. He's like, no, don't worry. Let's do it next week, Saturday, 8 p.m. sharp. Don't be late. And they have this tender conversation, and, he's got his pocket watch sitting there with her picture in it, and that's their way of saying their goodbyes. And I think, man, just the level of hot warmth that filled
that fuzzy
that
feeling.
entire scene, man. I was
Fuzzy.
like, yo, man. It's not even a matter of, oh, he crashed, and then later they say to Penny, sorry, he's
like-
gone. Like, no, it's happening in real time. I was like,
Because then she's like, Steve,
and then it just cuts through. Then essentially, as far as how he becomes an actual Avenger, that ice added as a cryogenic chamber where it preserved his body, and then about 70 years later,
the final
because
scene.
they never really stopped searching for him. So 70 years later, they find his body, defrost, and then
he
just
meets Nick Fury, and then
kind
goes
of
from there.
picks up from there. And that in
about it.
somewhat of a nutshell is pretty much the story of Captain America, the first Avenger. What
So
would you? No, I was gonna get to ratings.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Okay, yeah.
You know, that's how we ended off here.
As a rating, I think for me, man, I'd give this a 7.5.
I would go 7. Yeah, solid 7.
Yeah. Now this is definitely up there.
It's good. It's not bad.
Yeah.
It deserves what it is.
And most importantly, it holds up well.
Yeah.
And what I love is, which is, I suppose, an unspoken rule of origin stories, particularly in this universe of 30 plus movies and so on.
And so many characters.
If you try to talk to someone about a Marvel movie and say, now I must go start from the beginning, whatever. But the thing with origin movies, they're supposed to be proper standalone movies.
This definitely.
So you could show this to someone who, isn't caught up on the MCU franchise, who may not even necessarily be a comic book fan. Yeah. But the point is, whether they like it or not, they'll be able to follow the story from start to finish.
Because there's no lost. Because it's so early on in the franchise, there's no crossover.
Yeah.
Because because now in every movie or every series, there's always crossover, and you have to be up to date.
Yeah.
So
And I think for me, where origin stories are concerned, they should try
just be
and
standalone as
avoid that a
possible.
bit. Just
Yeah.
make it its own thing because you try not explain how
Emphasize that
this guy
character's
became who he
development. Yep.
is. Not only that, but how he earned his place in the larger team at hand. And yeah, so the 7.5 and
Yeah.
7
7.
score
Yeah.
overall.
So
I think
7.25.
that's definitely fair. And as usual, you know the drill. If there's anything that you feel like we missed out on, anything you want to add on,
Yeah.
definitely do let us know.
No.
But otherwise, that's
Yeah.
pretty
Our
much it.
Insta handle.
If you say the Phantom Geek Zone, can guarantee you will
Yeah.
definitely find us everywhere, including Instagram as well. And that pretty much brings this one to a wrap. Then.
Yep. Then we'll see you for the next one.
Yeah, catch you at the next review, which is gonna be Captain
Marvel.
Marvel. All right.
Right. See you guys.
Peace.